morning, everybody, again. Welcome. And you can see what we're going to be talking about, strategic autonomy. Mission possible or impossible? Thank you for coming. Notice one word that was used in that video was unthinkable. And it always worries me about these videos. They give the impression that actually life is getting easier and can get easier. I'd put to you that things are now changing at such a pace, with such urgency, that trying to nail down where there will be change in an optimistic way is much more difficult. I've been running this project called Thinking the Unthinkable for 10 years now. It's remarkable the number of times I've heard the word unthinkable raised in the last 48 hours. Right, so what we want to do is look at European strategic autonomy, mission impossible. We have to analyze what strategic autonomy really is. Easy to write, but much more difficult to define. Is it a mission which is possible? Or, and it's not my im there, it's an IM. You can't see it at the moment, but it's mission impossible. Let me introduce our four panelists, but I want you to feel that in the next 50 minutes, you can be engaged as well. We have microphones out there. It's not just going to be here talking to you. So if you've got contributions, we want to hear them. Don't sit on your hands and say we didn't hear from you. I'd like to hear from you at any point. So please use a piece of paper or get my attention somehow. First of all, let's go through and identify who's with us. First of all, Kajsa.
I can do that myself. Oh, fantastic.
Please do. Yes. A resting politician.
Thank you. Yes, Kajsa Ollongren. I'm from the Netherlands. I used to be the defense minister until somewhere last year. And I'm now at Chatham House as an associate fellow. And I'm an advisor to many defense tech funds. And I try to make myself useful in building European strategic autonomy.
Are you clear what strategic autonomy really is?
I think so.
Good, we'll come back to you.
Yes.
Elżbieta, Ella, from
Ella.
Poland, from Silesia, welcome.
Yes, from Poland, from Silesia. I was civil servant for my whole life. I started in the regional administration, dealing with the regional policy. Then I was for 2 terms in first Tusk cabinet minister for regional development and infrastructure and deputy prime minister. And then I was commissioner for single market industry. Started the European Defence Fund and European Defence Industrial Programme. Currently, I'm in Centre for European Policy Studies, chairwoman of the board.
Let's move to your left, please.
Yeah, I'm Ioannis Armakolas. I'm a university professor in Greece and also senior research fellow at the Hellenic Foundation for European Foreign Policy. ELIAMEP, it's the biggest foreign policy think tank in Greece. But I'm also more recently leading a new initiative called Think NEA, New Narratives of EU Integration, which is an initiative that tries to connect the dots when it comes to enlargement policy and show how enlargement and accession countries can be relevant for the current needs and current challenges of European policy making. Therefore, we connect enlargement policy to European strategic autonomy.
Can you keep up with the pace of change?
Well, I don't know if anyone can keep up with the pace of change these days, but we are doing our best, I think.
Volker Perthes, welcome.
Good morning, Volker Perthes. I used to be a think tank director as a director of the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, Stiftung, Wissenschaft and Politik, until 2020. Then I switched from theory into practice, went to the United Nations, was a representative of the Secretary General in Sudan and the head of the peace operation of the United Nations in Sudan. And that has ended. Since leaving the United Nations, I am back as a guest in my own institute, former institute in Berlin, finishing a book manuscript on multipolarity and its illusions, I think, and otherwise looking around for useful things to do.
Which is easier, running a think tank for 15 years in Berlin or being a UN special representative?
Well, running a think tank is definitely easier because it's not a life and death matter for a lot of people, right?
And being an SG representative?
It could involve questions of life and death. It's more responsibility, much more interesting also. much more taxing, but I guess it's, I mean, my experience is that it doesn't hurt if you bring think tank experience into political and international practice.
Does it adapt?
Oh yeah, it does.
Right, well, let's move on. Strategic autonomy. You said very clearly you think you know what it is. I'd like to hear from each of you. Please disagree if you want to. But what is your view, having been a minister up until last year, a defense minister?
Yes. Well, of course, I look at it from the perspective of defense and security and from the European perspective. And I think for me that means that Europe is united and that we learn from what we have seen during the pandemic and now during the war in Ukraine and our support for Ukraine and our strengthening of European defense. We have run into problems because of dependencies where we rely on countries that at some point may not do what we would like them to do. We saw it during the pandemic with China, and we saw it worldwide in different, let's say, levels of problems. I think for the Global South it was a much bigger problem than for Europe, but also for Europe it was a problem. We see it now on defense. We have created, and we were all there, a huge dependency on the United States. Ukraine has suffered most of that when the large package during the Biden administration took, I think, 4 or 5 months to go through Congress. It has cost Ukraine many, many lives. So that is what we have to adapt to. And for Europe, that means that we have to take our own defense industry very seriously. That we cannot be fragmented anymore, that we cannot allow this interoperability that we're suffering from anymore, which means working towards an internal market for defense, not waiting for it, because it will take some time. So first you start with countries that can cooperate amongst themselves on capabilities, on cooperation with their armed forces, and then you build up European strength, European defense. And let me also conclude by saying that for me, Europe is a region. It's not an institution. So the European Union is a very useful instrument, but it's about the region Europe, which includes Ukraine, UK, and all countries around it.
But just to be clear, and it's a question for all of you, autonomy from whom? Autonomy from who? And how to move that forward very quickly in a few seconds, Kajsa.
Well, autonomy, where there are critical things you need, like parts of weapons, or weapon systems, capabilities, we have to be able to provide that ourselves. Let me give you one example. So we in the Netherlands, we fly the F-35. We're very happy with it. It's probably the best, most capable fighter jet in the world. But we also know that if we don't get the software updates from the United States, we're nowhere. We cannot fly it anymore. And these are the issues that have to be solved.
Can I just ask you, given you've put it on the agenda, does the American defense industry have a kill button for the F-35? Can they demobilize what you've spent a large amount of cash on?
Well, you know, they can, perhaps not by a kill switch. I don't know if they have a kill switch. But what they do have is the
so
software,
you as defense minister
update.
But you as defense minister didn't know whether they had a kill switch or not?
What I did know and still know is that we depend completely on the US and the US industry for the software updates, and it's a flying computer. So without the software updates, it's useless.
Ella?
I fully agree. I think that this is because we are talking about European strategic autonomy. We are talking about Europe. So this is a state when we can pursue our own foreign and security goals, and we can act independently from others. For now, our security depends on NATO, which is financed in majority by the United States. And this was an issue. This became an issue to be visible a few years ago, or many years ago. But it was very difficult to push it through European agenda. As we started in 2016, as the time when Delphi Economic Forum started. So as we started in 2016 to discuss European Defence Fund, it took us 2 or 3 years to discuss with all European member states very small instrument, because remember, it was much before, or much, it was few years before Ukraine war in Ukraine, and was small instrument that was trying to facilitate the joint procurement in the European Union. Because we have small markets, fragmented, as Kajsa said, fragmented small market, the prices are high because everybody procures the same things. We lose commonly in European Union billions of euros annually. We are using, and it's the same situation right now, because we procure not jointly but separately. So it was the small instrument, but we discussed it for 3 years. So maybe not suddenly, and this is unfortunate situation, but with war in Ukraine and with hostile American administration, we see, and finally European leaders see that only unity is the way forward for the European Union. Of course, number one government was that Polish government then, that was really stopping any progress on the common defense program. We started then 2 defense initiatives, so European Defense Fund and European Defense Infrastructure Program, a kind of DARPA thing, so for innovation in defense. But of course, what we need the most, I think we'll discuss it later, but I will maybe...
Put it on the agenda now, though.
Yeah. What we need to discuss the most is what, again, was said by Kajsa, unity. First thing first is a political will among European leaders to act commonly, to act together. This is the major issue for the European Union. For single market, my experience is that this is the number one issue in Europe right now.
Ella, let me ask you to give an audit quickly of what you think is happening in Poland. You're a frontline state, essentially. We were talking about the airfield at Rzeszów and what has happened, the extraordinary transition that has taken place. What have you seen in very short order in your country as a frontline state, moving towards 5%, et cetera, et cetera?
We are very close to 5% of spending for defense. Definitely Poland is current government. We are very much for this unified efforts in defense. But again, the second thing, the first thing is a political will. The political will in Poland is there. We feel it. Because of course, it's not very equally felt in the whole European Union, but Poland, Baltics, they feel how it is to have the border, to have the war just behind our borders.
And are they pulling, do you believe, the issue of strategic autonomy?
No, the East Europe. We are Europeans. We are in the European Union. We are talking about European Union strategic autonomy, not about Eastern European Union strategic autonomy.
Okay, let's pause for the moment. Volker, I'm going to come to you next. What is your reflection, particularly with the key position now being taken by Germany as a coalition is being formed, about where the definition will be of strategic autonomy led by Germany?
Well, I'll come to that. And as a former academic, I mean, 8 years ago, we came out with a research paper at my institute then, and we defined strategic autonomy. Why did we do that? I mean, it's not a European concept. Other countries have done that before us, spoken about that. In India, for example, they talk about strategic autonomy for decades. But in Europe, it wasn't a concept. 8 years ago, still remember Angela Merkel? She came back from her first summit with Donald Trump, 2017, probably NATO summit. And so she addresses a public in Germany, and she says in a very characteristic way, well, the times where we could rely on others are, to an extent, over. Very Merkelian, right? So that was her. Then realizing that the good times where others would define for us what security is are no longer existing. So our definition for strategic autonomy at that time was strategic autonomy, European or otherwise, is to define your own strategic priorities yourself and creates the conditions for implementing them. So it is about the definition of your interests, your priorities in foreign and security policies and others, but also making sure that you can implement your priorities.
So how's it
and of
changed?
course you would do that together with partners, ideally, but if need be, you would have to do it on your own. But it is, and I think this is very important, it is not autonomy against others.
Yes.
It is autonomy for yourself, and it is not autarky. It is not that we want to be alone. It is always about creating partnerships. The European Commission then took it on and spoke about open strategic autonomy, and she basically meant economic relations, and that comes back with a vengeance now with the tariff thing. It's open strategic autonomy. We want to be able to define our fate, and to create the conditions, but we want to be open, do it together with others. The new German government, I'm not going to dodge your question, it's not yet there, but it's almost there. I think they have understood the challenges, and they are more, I have to say that with some sadness, because I really do like Olaf Scholz. I don't know why he didn't sort of use the opportunities he had. He had a difficult coalition. I think the new people have a head start in confidence with their European partners, and they're going to use it. And that's, well, that's not everything it needs, but it's a lot of that what it needs, and they know what the challenges are.
But Volker, look back at the document that you did 8 years ago.
Yes.
How much would you redefine what strategic autonomy is and what can be achieved at what speed?
The theoretical definition I would not redefine. I think it is totally correct. The priorities have changed over these 8 years. 8 years ago, we did not think that we would have a main ally who would put the alliance into question the way he does today. We would not think, Angela Merkel, I quoted her, realized that there was a difficult partner on the other side of the Atlantic, but we would not think that America would start to destroy or dismantle the system which it has built or had built for 80 years. So the priorities have changed. It is more about defense than it was 8 years ago, because we had, Donald Trump is not the main driver of changes. Vladimir Putin has been the main driver of changes then. So we had the double Ukraine shock, and so it is much more about defense. The definition still stands, but it is more defense-oriented today.
And what about the speed at which it can be implemented?
Sorry?
What about the speed at which it could be implemented?
Look, we have former European commissioners here and ministers. Europe, to its critics, is always too slow.
Yes.
And there is something in it, but also, yesterday we had a session here about deliberative democracy. We don't decide as quickly as a dictator does, because we have 27 autonomous states, independent, sovereign states. So it takes some time to get to decisions. But when we come to the decisions, we also implement them. So yes, it takes longer than it should. So the speed is not our main quality in Europe. I think the depth of decision is more the quality.
But can it improve?
It can improve, and it has improved. Look at Jean Monnet, and he is a quintessential European. He said that Europe is built through crisis, and I think he is still right. And in crisis, we act. We performed better than critics, including people at my own institute, thought after COVID, and we performed better after Ukraine than critics were thinking. There's still a lot of space to sky.
All right. Well, let me put that to the others in a moment. Progress through crisis. What's the Greek view here?
Well, I'll tell you about the Greek view, but let me answer also the initial question about the strategic autonomy. Because you said against who? It's not, we still collaborate. We still work together with partners and allies, hopefully also with other countries, even though we are not anymore in this heyday of globalization, so we need to take that into account. Deglobalization or slowbalization, etc. But the problem is that when a crisis comes, we need to be ready also to be on our own, to be resilient, to respond to the challenges. We cannot rely a pandemic comes, we cannot rely on China for masks or on Americans for medicine. So we need to be ready. We will collaborate, we work together, we build the value chains together with partners and allies, but at the same time, we need to use the full potential of Europe when the crisis comes, when the problem is there, to be ready to work on our own and defend our societies and be resilient.
And how far has it moved, in your view?
It's moving slowly. I mean, you have people who have been in decision-making tables, and they know it's not easy in the EU. It's moving slowly, but I think, and I would start from even the economic crisis more than 10 years ago, every crisis we are becoming faster in responding and building the institutions that are necessary. And I think it's a realization process for Europe. It's a realization process that, well, at the end of the day, we may be alone, so we have to be ready for that. We are not seeking to be alone, if that was your initial question. We don't want to be separate from the US, but we will be ready to be separate in case of need and if there is a crisis. And of course, if the US starts working against us, like you mentioned earlier, we will be ready. It will take a bit of time, but not as much time as it took, for example, to respond to the economic crisis, not as much time as it took to respond to the COVID crisis. So every crisis that comes, we are becoming faster, I think. And this is key, because as it was said earlier, this is not one state, it's many states. Now, my perspective, and I will get to Greece, and this is the perspective of our initiative, Think NEA. It was mentioned earlier by Kajsa. It's Europe's strategic autonomy and not EU's. It's a region, it's a continent, and not an institution. That means we need to use the full potential. The EU has 27 member states, but there are another 10 countries that want to join the EU. The EU needs to start thinking about its strategic autonomy by including one way or another the countries that want to join the European Union. And there's a lot of potential there. So full potential of Europe means also using the potential, identifying and making available for Europe's strategic autonomy the potential of the countries that are not yet members, but they will become hopefully members in the coming years. And there is a lot to be gained by engaging more with these countries. When it comes to Greece, for Greece is extremely important. I have to say, it's not that I told you so answer, but Greece has been spending a significant part of its GDP over many, many years. So we never had a problem reaching the 2%, right? For obvious reasons. So for us, always the security questions and the questions of resilience of our society was tied to European integration, was tied to our fortune, which is in Europe. So it's important for us that Europe develop its own strategic autonomy, its own responses to crisis. It's not that we are not partners and allies with the US. We have excellent relations with the US. We hope to continue to have, but our security, our policy making, the resilience of our society is tied also to European integration, and this is extremely important for us.
Let me keep pushing this. You don't have it up on the screen, but I'll read it to you again. This is the title of this session. European Strategic Autonomy, Mission Impossible or Possible. And we need to focus on that. Tom Cruise is not going to burst through the screen on a motorbike in a moment, but there's a danger of spending too long designing the architecture at the moment. What, therefore, from all of you, needs to be done at speed? We can keep talking about we've got to do this, we've got to do that, but there is a very real strategic threat now, unambiguous in many ways, Ella. And I'd like to invite anyone who wants to come in. George, who's somewhere, has a microphone, so get the microphone to you if you want to come in, please. Ella.
I think three things. First, the political will, which I hope is there because it's visible. Then the decision-making process in the EU, it should be put on the table. It's very difficult to take any decision, and that's why those processes are so long. I mean, about the unanimity, which can kill any idea. And of course, I agree that each and every crisis really prepares European Union for better for the next one. So we are.
But does it have to take a crisis to prepare?
It was so far. I mean, this was the situation so far, that each and every crisis taught us something. Unfortunately, because I mentioned before that it took us 3 or 4 years to discuss small European defense fund. By the way, to be honest, it has to be said that it was France that started this discussion then. It was France and Emmanuel Macron that started to talk about European strategic autonomy. Political will, decision-making process in the EU, and last but definitely not least, industry, industrial competitiveness in Europe. This is very much linked for strategic autonomy. You need industry, you need military, and you need a political will. So these are those 3 things that are extremely important. And of course, again, one sentence only about my history. The discussion then, this 10 years ago, was about we are weakening NATO. We are weakening NATO.
That was
only
then.
That was then. And you know, which then even, again, before this administration, before these hostile moves, before the war, for some people, me included, was very clear that having 23 of 27 EU member states in NATO, only 4 are not NATO members. So having majority of the EU member states in NATO, being stronger in defense and security as a European Union, we make ultimately NATO stronger. It was very, very clear for us, but it took us 3 years. Now it's like a spark. It's going. So the political will is there.
Well, Kajsa, you're a resting politician. You're not standing for re-election. I checked with you beforehand. You're not planning to go back into the political fray, and I can therefore push you on this. Do the political class understand the enormity and the urgency in a way which can be translated and transmitted to a public who's going to vote for them? Or is that part of the problem which is always going to be holding back? We've been through COVID, we've seen the delays, and the reluctance of many governments to act until it's too late almost.
Yes.
What's your perspective about the tension between the urgency and the political reality?
Well, it depends on which country you look at. And that's one of the problems, of course, of Europe. There are so many different countries, different politics, different election cycles, etc. If I look at my own country, I'm a bit worried about this. I hope that we are in a phase of a coalition with the right-wing party, populist party who doesn't care very much for defense spending, who doesn't care very much about the war.
But do they understand the threat which has to be defended against?
And if you translate that into do they understand the threat, they don't assess the threat in the way that I think we should. And I think you can't blame the audiences, the Dutch voters and the Dutch public, if the leaders are not telling this story. And so, I mean, in some way you would say we need better leaders in order to get sort of a better outcome of the elections. Because I think the right-wing populists in many countries are blocking the way forward, and it's certainly happening in the Netherlands now. And I think that you have to be very, very honest. The war in Ukraine is a threat to all of us, and the best we can do now is support Ukraine, arm Ukraine to the teeth, and be there for them to deter Russia to continue this aggression and to start this aggression somewhere else.
Are you saying that even here we are sitting on Saturday morning talking about strategic economy in a glorious part of Greece, most people have no clue as to what we're talking about, and therefore it doesn't have any political resonance, the kind that is needed to push through what you're saying is needed?
Yes, and you also have to be brutally honest about that you will have to sacrifice for this. Sacrifice, I mean, in the end, like the Ukrainians do, fighting, a matter of life and death, but sacrifice also in your daily life. Because if you have to increase defense spending, it has to come from somewhere. Yes. You have to raise taxes, or you have to spend less on something else. Yes. Or you have to create the fiscal space, and I'm all for it, and let's do that in Europe. But we have to think about what conditions are you going to put in place in order to be able to do so. And you have to be honest to people. There is no free lunch here, but we have to do it if we want to be masters of our own destiny.
Volker, when you look back at your opinion poll at the election 6 weeks ago, what will you conclude? What was in the grit of the data about the kind of thing we're talking about here, strategic autonomy, and how that plays with an enormous nation like Germany? What have you learned?
Well, I guess in almost all European countries, security and defense issues are not the ones that decide elections. People are interested in other questions, in bread and butter things, and they don't necessarily make the relation between security policies, foreign policies, bread and butter. At the same time, you could say, even in Germany, more than 60% of the voters voted for parties who explicitly said in the campaign that they are going to raise defense spending. And that is unheard of for German elections. It was very, very clear. If you looked into the programs of the Social Democrats, who had the Chancellor, into the Christian Democrats, who will have the Chancellor, into also the programs of the Green Party, who is in opposition now, they were all for increasing defense spending. So that's something. I would like to come back to something you said, that we are probably discussing in Europe too much about architecture. I think it's a valid criticism, even though institutions are important. But I guess what we see right now, and here I'm with Ioannis, that things are speeding up, and we are not thinking too much about architecture, but about action. We gave up financial orthodoxies who have taken us through the Greek crisis, through other crises, within weeks, and made a huge defense package available both on the European level, but also in a very frugal country like Germany, and with the support of other frugal countries like the Netherlands, like the Finns, like the Swedes and others. A. B. Brexit. Well, it's still valid, but the British Prime Minister comes to EU summits and participates with other EU leaders in strategic discussions and decisions. I mean, that's not architecture, that's action, actually. So then enlargement. It has been very slow, but we have a shift in mindset here. Enlargement now is seen as a geostrategic field or geostrategic field of action for the European Union. We are making priorities for some countries because we think they are strategically important. So I think there is a change, not to the architecture, because that would actually take too long, but to the way we handle our architecture and we handle our instruments.
Let me see, does anyone want to come in? Anyone got the microphone?
May I add something, just one sentence?
Ella, can I just check if anyone's got the microphone? Anyone want to come in or not? Yes or no? Please, I'll come to you in a moment. Right, Ella.
Just one sentence, because now we see that UK is coming to the table and discussing the defense and security topics, while 10 years ago, UK was the biggest opponent of any common defense discussions, just before Brexit. It was the country that was opposing any kind of progressing in a common defense policy. So the times are changing.
They are.
May I add something? I think I agree totally with Volker. Europe used to be all about how to perfectly create the rules, the architecture, as you put it. And of course, it's clear that the architecture needs to be tweaked, but I'm with Volker here that actually Europe is actually doing things even before the architecture is tweaked, right? Of course, we need to change the rules of the game for integrating new members about decision-making, for example. But does not prevent us at the moment from actually doing things. It's extremely important because in the past, before the recent crisis, a country like Hungary would have prevented us from acting. Now, as you see, the EU has found ways to bypass the obstacles that Hungary is posing. And Europe has put how many, 13, 14 rounds of sanctions against Russia, despite the opposition of Hungary. So ways are found. We will also, because this is EU at the end of the day, the rules will be at some point be reformulated to reflect these new needs, but not anymore the rules preventing us from actually doing things. I think it's extremely important, and if you would ask anyone 20 years ago or 30 years ago, if EU would be in a position to do this big change in policy so fast, I think it would have been unthinkable. So
right, I'm going to ask you all before we conclude, where you think we will be, say, a year from now with political reality. Let me just get a question, please. Tell us who you are.
Hi, can you hear me? So my name is Catherine. I wanted to ask you, we hear very often, and I think you mentioned it as well, Mrs. Bieńkowska, that for autonomy, it's imperative that we revive industrialization, which has, if not died, been severely reduced in Europe for sometimes the sake of climate policies and being sustainable and competitive economically. So how would you combine sustainability with practicality to face this?
I mean, this is what Kajsa also mentioned before. This is a question about people in the European Union, to what extent we are devoted to the concept of strategic autonomy, and to what extent we are ready to devote our security for the in the situation when we will have to choose between some spendings, between the spending for, I don't know, social things, or because industry is indispensable part of the defense. So defense in European industry must be supported. And at the same time, I think we should not reject the sustainable goals that European Union really voted and agreed on. So industry is definitely there on the table, but there are other spendings in the national and European budgets that can be reduced because of this massive defense spending.
Kajsa, can I come to you, because the Dutch had the chairman of the military committee, the admiral, who said the cupboard is bare. He said at a NATO conference, maybe it was in your time still as defense minister, we do not have the stuff anymore. We have to be honest about that. We've got to gear up. And Volker, I need to come to you about Rheinmetall and what is going on with the 155mm shells and so on. In other words, there is a massive drive underway, but it takes a long time for business and industry to react.
Yes, it takes a long time and it takes too long.
Were you frightened by what he said, your
well,
admiral?
no, Rob was right, and I think was also in the right place to say this, to encourage everybody to do more. But to come back also to the question, or to connect it to the question, is what we see now, as we understand it, what Trump is trying to do, it's all about making America great again, and it's sort of going back to the future, to industrialize again, to have everything in America. And that is, frankly, I think it's not going to work. It's not the right road to choose for Europe. So it's not about making Europe great again, but it is about being a global player and a global power. And for that, we need competitiveness, as we know from the Draghi report and others, and we need a defense industry in Europe that's strong, that's not fragmented, as it is now, that is not, focused only on national industry, but it's going to have to be a true European industrial base for defense. And we have to jump to the future technology. And that is the war in Ukraine, quite frankly, is a revolution if you look at the technology used. The autonomous systems, the drones in every area, the usage of AI. We have to take that leap now. So, I mean, the legacy industries are there, the big primes are there, but they also have to change and they have to become digital. And I think there we have an opportunity as Europe, as Europeans, to take that step while still engaging, of course, in sustainability, because all these capabilities will also require massive, energy. So how do you want to produce this energy? Are we going to invest more in sustainable energy? More also in nuclear, I think all of that is necessary. But I think we are in the right place to do that and not make the mistake of thinking that we have to go back where we were some 40 or 50 years ago.
Volker, let me come to you. I mean, there's been a massive declaration of intent in Germany to scale up the military-industrial complex through Rheinmetall and other big companies. Is that going to be enough in time? The same thing has happened with missiles in Northern Ireland, for example. Thales are having to scale up at a rate they were never expecting to.
I'll answer that, but I wanted to give a short answer to the colleague who asked from the floor. I think there is no contradiction between sustainability and industrialization. In Europe, particularly in Germany, we have not deindustrialized as the Americans have. So there is a basis to renew, rejuvenate, and get into the modern technologies. Sustainability makes us more autonomous. And there is a clear example from Germany and from others. I mean, with sustainable energy, we don't need Nord Stream 2. We don't need gas from Russia. So there is a clear connection between being sustainable, having sustainable energy, and not being dependent on others, particularly on adversaries or potential adversaries. As to the defense industrial base in Germany, I hope that, because you asked where will we be in a year from now, in a year from now we will not ask for the German or the Italian or the French industrial base, but for the European defense industrial base. And there is something happening here. Money always makes a difference. So for the first time we have money from the European budget for common defense production. That's a huge step. I don't think everybody realizes that. And that includes Rheinmetall 155 millimeter ammunition. That also includes new startups we have in Germany, like Helsing, who do these missiles and drones and other things. So a lot of things are happening. Is it enough? No, it's never enough. It's never enough, but it is going into the right direction. Rheinmetall is producing in Ukraine, and probably if, which I would hope, the Ukraine war ends at some point and we still need the preparedness, we will probably buy Rheinmetall shells from production sites in Ukraine. And that's a good sign. That is that the European defense industrial base is coming together, not the EU defense industrial base.
And is that giving or moving us towards strategic autonomy?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's an important step to go there. What we need to do, and I think Ella has said it, and I want to repeat it because it is important. We need to go, and I hope in a year from now we will say that we are there, into common defense planning on a European level.
Do you think there's a will? Is there a will for that?
And common procurement on a European level. I guess we are going there. I hope in a year we can say mission not impossible, but at least half accomplished.
Do you believe there's a political will for that?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. One more question. We've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Anna Kristinovska. I focus mostly on the Western Balkans, and I would like to connect the discussion on including the Western Balkans basically with what you mentioned on 155 millimeter shells. There are over 200 companies producing in the defense industry in the region. One of them alone in Bosnia and Herzegovina has the capacity to produce 500,000 155 millimeter shells. And yet the region is not included in the recently published white paper. Ukraine is there, of course, for a good base. But how do we, I mean, is the EU looking into the region? If yes, why it's not there? If not, why is it not? Thank you.
Thanks. We've got 4 minutes.
Take this thing.
Roll that answer into your other answer, which will be, where do you think we might be in 6 to 12 months?
Well, my plea will be that in 6 to 12 months, the mindset will be ready for us to use the full potential of Europe. And I mean Europe as a continent and not only the EU. So I connect to what our colleague said. There is so much potential for everything that we are discussing here that needs to be done. No one will replace Germany, not even Ukraine. But of course, when you include Ukraine in the context of these strategic autonomy discussions and these European defense readiness discussions, it makes sense and it makes Europe stronger. If you include also Western Balkans, they say the same. There is a significant defense industry in the Western Balkans. If there is investment from the EU, from European countries, it will definitely help the defense readiness of Europe. Almost €1 billion worth of armament has gone from the Western Balkans to Ukraine in the last couple of years. It's a serious commitment on the part of this region. There is strategic material, critical raw material from the Western Balkans that the EU is not purchasing, and they go to China. So there is so much to do about uniting Europe and using the full potential of Europe of this strategic autonomy. You need the Germanys of Europe, but you need also the smaller nations of Europe. You need all the European countries together for this.
Ella,
but the first thing first, again, maybe aside a little bit, is to, and I use very personal word. I think it's been so unfair to keep Western Balkan states in the corridor for the European Union for so many years. It's so unfair that we're left, you know, really ticking the boxes in the negotiations process, but still staying at the same place at the same moment. That we need to finally speed up this process. Comparing to Ukraine, Western Balkans are a small part of Europe. There are several million people comparing to,
But,
huge
Ella,
Ukraine. Okay, sorry, aside, but I needed to say this.
The much broader strategic autonomy, I hear positive voices from the four of you about where we could now be in 6 to 12 months. What's your view?
I think that definitely this is mission very much possible in this time of history in which we are now, and we should do everything we can to, because political will is there. We need to make the next steps. So this is something which really will unite us even more. But because of course, as we repeated, few of us, we are fragmented. We are fragmented in the industry. We are fragmented in the single market. We are fragmented in defense industry. Finally, maybe it will be finished forever.
All right. Well, let me check with Kajsa.
One more thing. Again, very last sentence. Please do not forget about European, really extremely fastly growing space sector, which is very much connected to the defense, of course, and security. And this is sector which is growing for the last several years in enormous speed.
Are we going to be less fragmented in the next 6 to 12 months? In other words, there being more decisive movement forward with a political commitment, both in terms of political capital and also cash?
Well, when it comes to the defense industrial base, I think yes. We will have taken steps, but we will certainly not be there yet, because when it comes to Europe and its collective defense, we rely on NATO. That is what we've built for our collective defense, not the European Union. And our readiness of our armed forces is low. The strategic enablers are really mostly American, and space is of course one of them, but also heavy lifting and things like that. And in the end, we are under the American nuclear umbrella. So on the defense industrial base, I'm absolutely sure we will take very decisive steps, and we can do it. And that is very important, but it will also be defined by how we deal with this issue of NATO, with the transatlantic relationship. Is America in or out? Or are we phasing them out? Do we have a plan for that? And there, I think, it's still a big question mark, and it's not our question mark, but it's an American question mark.
And I have to ask you, as a former defense minister, do you reckon Dutch forces are prepared, willing, and adequately equipped for war?
Well, they are adequately equipped, at least for some time. But the whole problem in Europe is our readiness and our sustainability of our armed forces.
Volker, last thought from you. Where do you think we'll be in 6 to 12 months? Will we be well down the track where this debate will still be happening, but fine-tuning as opposed to a commitment of principle?
Well, I think you put it well. I mean, we will take the decisions, or we have taken the decisions in principle. We will be in a phase of implementation. We will be fine-tuning, and of course, we will hit some difficulties on the road. That's a natural thing. A lot of things that happen, of course, will depend on what the developments in Ukraine are. Will there be an end to the war within this year? Will it buy us time, and will it buy the Russians time? I mean, this is a question we will have to analyze over the next 12 months. But I do think, and I'm quite positive now, that even if the fighting stops in Ukraine, the Europeans will not let down their guard. They will still work on readiness. I mean, it's not called rearm, it's called readiness 2030, but I guess we're going to continue it and discuss the fine print next year.
All right. Well, thank you all very much indeed. And I'm looking at the title again, European Strategic Autonomy, Mission Impossible. I'm tempted to say, based on this discussion for the last hour, mission probable.
Agree. Okay.
Is there agreement?
Yes.
Fine enough.
We have agreement in the panel. That's a good positive sign to take away from this meeting. Thanks very much indeed, everybody.